Stargate DC-1, healthcare security, AWS, AI agents, Intel's Linux future is unclear, MSEU deal seems to be unpopular, there's an Ultra Tomahawk out there, and we're going to share a little too much about SharePoint in this episode of the Tech Field Day Rundown. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Tech Field Day Rundown for July 23rd, 2025. It's hot out there. It's summertime. Well, at least it is north of the equator. And that means you probably want some ice cream, perhaps a nice fudge sickle, or perhaps a Nutty Buddy. I don't care. Pick one or the other. Pick them both because it's National Ice Cream Day. And maybe you should get some for your parents too, because it's National Parents Day. But I don't know that there's a National Parents Buy Your Parents Ice Cream Day. That's tomorrow, maybe. What isn't tomorrow is the rundown, because that's today, and we are enjoying all of the great things that come along with doing the news on the rundown. And joining me, of course, is my wonderful wintertime co-host, Mr. Alastair Cooke. Al, how's it going?
Well, it is a beautiful morning here in Tauranga in New Zealand, and it is a scorching 40 degrees. Unfortunately, it's 40 degrees in freedom units, not in science units, and that means that it's not scorching at all. That makes it a good day to have ice cream because it won't melt all over your hand before you get to eat it.
Yeah, well, I got to give it to the people out there. In fact, I could give them a hand, not a melty ice cream hand, for all of this news that we have to cover, because we're going to hit all the fun stuff: AI security vulnerabilities, and more. So I hope that you're ready to tune in. We're actually going to start off with one of my favorite projects, named after a Richard Dean Anderson Showtime TV show. That's, of course, Stargate, the big Oracle and OpenAI SoftBank project. They're touting a huge expansion of that project. They're going to be adding 4.5 gigawatts of data center capacity in the US. Yeah, that's right. We did measure the data center capacity in the thing that makes the Back to the Future DeLorean run. Uh, there are some big promises, though, but you may recall that we've been talking about Stargate for a while because, well, this project's having a little trouble getting off the ground, a little trouble dialing out, as it were. A recent report says that plans are already starting to be scaled back, and the companies are now just hoping to have one small-ish alpha site data center open by the end of the year. And they claim that this is going to create thousands of jobs. But I'd be honest with you if I didn't say that this project feels a little bit more hype than real progress right now. Al, do you think that we're ever going to have a complete dialing solution?
I think we should plan for that. Uh, but what I think is really telling in this is this was announced in January, and it was announced with your US President and Sam Altman standing up together and saying how wonderful this was going to be, along with, of course, Larry Ellison and the CEO of SoftBank. And I'm always a little cynical when a project is huge and announced in a very political way. Makes me feel like there might be quite a gap between that and the final reality. Now, the long-term plan, still spend ridiculously large amounts of money to build massive data centers for OpenAI to consume all of the GPUs and all of the power forever. Reality of delivery, well, you've got to get something running. You've got to get some tin in the ground, some concrete in the ground, I guess, and tin on top of it. And you really need to be able to say you've delivered something. Kind of takes a long time to build a 4.5 gigawatts worth of capacity, and it's going to be built across multiple locations. And that $500 billion being spent was around the world, not just in the US. So yeah, it's interesting to see that they're still talking up what they're going to build rather than telling us what they have built in that, what is it now, 6 months? 6 months and 2 days since the announcement of this deal. Yeah, it's not surprising that it's taking a while to build out. We do also see other studies around suggesting that there is no way there will be enough GPUs for all of the data centers that have been announced, that the actual production of the GPUs and the other computer hardware that's supposed to go in these data centers over the next few years, there just is no way it'll be produced. And that's an interesting piece of study that sits alongside this, right? We announce huge things are going to happen, and then we don't do huge things. Yeah, if you've followed how things work with political announcements and political alignment for large high tech organizations, you're not terribly surprised about this. You may be surprised by a new report from the Fortified Health Security, and it's outlining some top cybersecurity problems in healthcare. Actually, come to think of it, I'm not surprised to find that there is poor risk planning, weak supply chains, outdated systems, missing inventory records, and a lack of training in health. Um, these issues are connected to and have been exposed in major breaches like the 2024 Change Healthcare attack. Despite the risks, the report shows that some progress has been made in fixing old systems. Hmm, I wonder how much. Planning for incidents and improving leadership and identity security. The findings are based on data from 2023 to mid 2025 across various North American healthcare organizations. So, supposedly the finest healthcare organizations in the world in your US system. And yeah, this seems like there might be a lot of old, archaic systems still in play in healthcare in the US. Tom, is it looking after your health well?
Right now, yeah, for the time being, I guess. Uh, you're right. We do have the best healthcare system that money can buy, that then immediately takes all of the profits and plows them back into shareholder equity, which will turn out to be one of the three great lies of the modern industrial revolution area. But let me tell you why one of these things is the hospital's fault and one of them isn't. Obviously, the hospital's fault is that they're not upgrading their systems, because why would you spend money on IT when you could give it to people who really don't need it? That's one of the problems of operating a for-profit enterprise like healthcare. I mean, I don't want to cast aspersions, but why is it that most every other country in the world operates healthcare like a basic human right and not a business? That's a discussion for a different podcast. But the fact is that most hospitals are running on older equipment, at least from an IT perspective. When we need a new MRI machine, we'll order one of those because we can charge for that. But the wireless network and the cabling plant and the firewalls, we can't charge the customers for that, and so those get best effort. The other thing that I think has kind of been a maybe not an explicit thing as of late is this idea that we don't attack hospitals, right? Think of the Geneva Conventions. We don't shoot churches, we don't shoot hospitals, we don't bomb Red Cross trucks. So I think that what happened was is that hospitals just kind of assumed that people were going to stay from out of there and not hack them and try to steal patient records and cause other outage problems. Surprise, hackers don't care about your Geneva Conventions. And so hospitals are very tempting targets because they're very large enterprises with very short stabs and very old, outdated equipment. They are very tempting targets. And once you get in there, you can cause a lot of havoc. And better yet, all those profits that they have that they're trying to give away to the shareholders. That means that you might be able to lock up some systems and encrypt some data and get the regulators on your butt if you don't pay us to unlock all of it. That's right. Hospitals do have a tendency to pay ransoms and other kinds of extortion fees. So here's a thought for all of you hospital IT administrators out there. It might be time to invest some of those profits in keeping yourselves out of the news and out of reports like this. I mean, we're not going to get universal health care in this country overnight, but maybe we could keep people from dying because folks don't know how IT works. You may have noticed last week that Amazon Web Services had their big New York summit. And during that summit, they announced some new tools to make it easier for companies to build and run AI agents. The main launch, which was called Amazon Bedrock Agent Core, which is also my favorite gospel band of all time, helps developers get AI agents into production a little bit faster. AWS is expanding its marketplace to offer ready to use AI tools from partners like Salesforce and Deloitte. To ready support for AI with better data, they have improved Amazon S3 storage and introduced the SageMaker catalog to help organize and find data a little bit more easily. Another tool is called Kiro, and it lets developers use natural language to create and manage AI projects, almost like it's a vibe. Overall, AWS is making it simpler for businesses to adopt and scale AI across their operations. My question for you, Al, is that a good thing?
Yes and no and maybe, and it depends. I think that's the answer to all of the questions we ask ourselves at the moment. Uh, it is nice to see AWS taking some of the heavy lifting away from the job of building AI solutions. So, seeing more packaged capabilities to assemble together an AI solution is good. Making it easier for developers to add AI to their applications. When we start recognizing that AI is not the thing, it's the thing that makes the thing better. Thanks, Bobby Allen at Google. Um, that AI is a feature of a product, or it's a tool that you use as a capability in your thing. It's not by itself valuable as a thing, and so making it easier to integrate AI into your existing applications, making it easier to get AI into your interactions with your customers or with your internal staff. Anything that helps us make that easier has got to be good, particularly if it helps us make it easier in a way that's cost effective in the long term. That last bit might be a little interesting. One of the changes in here is taking the Amazon S3 service, that place where people dump all of their big data that they don't know what to do with, and then enhancing more capabilities around both metadata and also vectors. Vectors are a really important part for what's called retrieval augmented generation, or RAG. It's the way that we will be taking business data and adding it to our generative AI applications. And so these are very important capabilities that are going to be very useful for people who are already committed to using AWS to hold everything and make it easier for them to build applications. Um, I remain a little cynical around AI tools being used to build AI tools. Just curious. But we'll see. We'll see how that plays out. I've been wrong in the past when I've been cynical about products and thought that they would never work very well. So let's hope this one does work very well. From what I can tell, Kira has definitely gotten some attention, and people have been playing around with Kira a lot. But getting towards large scale pipelined AI, lots of agentic AI. This is where rather than the AI reporting to a human, it actually completes some task itself. This is definitely a place where we're seeing a lot of development, and that's one of the things that's in the Google's Vertex AI Builder, AI Agent Builder in particular. There's a whole collection of tools that AWS is hoping will bring them forward on that. Uh, all of the big cloud providers are looking to make it easier to build your AI applications, and AWS definitely wants to be on that. Intel, on the other hand, has ended the Clear Linux OS project after 10 years. This is a Linux operating system that was built to be very lean and very high performance, specifically and exclusively on Intel hardware. It's no longer getting updates and patches, and users have been advised to switch to another Linux distribution because, well, there's going to be no updates and patches. Um, no official reason for the removal of this Linux distribution, but you've got to think that it's to do with the refocusing within Intel, that they're cutting off a thing that has relatively low usage and pretty high maintenance cost. Um, Intel says it will support Linux still, but by providing hardware optimizations for other Linux distributions. Tom, is Clear Linux an important part of your estate or your deployed environments anywhere?
No, and I don't think it was a very important part of anybody else's either. And I think that's the reason why Intel has decided to cut it loose, is because it does take resources to maintain things like a Linux distribution. And when you are optimizing your Linux distribution to run on a platform, you have to make sure that it runs better than anybody else's. You have to take every trick that you can. I mean, who among us hasn't tried to emerge a Gentoo distribution onto a specific architecture? I can't even finish that sentence without laughing because it's been a while since anybody's done that. Intel wanted you to run Clear Linux on their platforms because it gave them an advantage because that Linux was faster, however much faster that was. Well, guess what? Now they don't have a whole lot of platforms left for you to run Linux on. A lot of the things that they're focusing on don't run an operating system natively. And so they're just kind of saying, well, why don't we just slipstream our features into other more popular distributions, and then we can gain that advantage across all of our locations. Because I promise you, unless they included like a download code in the box of the server that you bought or the NUC that you bought, nobody was going to go out and search for best Linux OS for Intel. They were just going to go download whatever they're used to running, whether it's Ubuntu or Slackware or whatever. And the fact that they don't even have the NUC anymore or any of their servers or really anything that's customer facing should tell you. I mean, the only reason that people would have wanted to use Clear Linux is if it gave them a definite advantage on that Intel GPU. Oh man, I almost got through that sentence without laughing. uh, that's the problem, is that this entire thing has become less about the OS running on the actual server and more about how you can interface with GPUs. And Intel's not in a position to do that right now. AMD doesn't care. NVIDIA doesn't care. They're just letting you run whatever you want. So in a way, Clear Linux will live because if the repos are out there, somebody will grab them and do something with them. But I don't think it's going to live the way that you think it will. The product will live on in other Linux distributions because they'll become a little bit more optimized for certain Intel architectures. But at the end of the day, the people who are responsible for maintaining it will be sacked eventually, or just reassigned somewhere and doing something boring, like, I don't know, working on a car or something. Microsoft has reached a deal with CISPE. I'm sure there's a way to pronounce that, but it's very European because that's a group of European cloud providers. The deal, of course, is how they're going to change their software and the way that it's licensed in Europe. The agreement offers local hosting, pay as you go pricing, and fewer data sharing requirements. Well, the goal of this is to help EU vendors compete with Microsoft's own cloud services. Weird. CISPE calls it a big step forward for digital privacy and fairness, which sounds like a very EU thing to say. But those nasty critics say that it gives Microsoft a little bit too much control. It doesn't actually fix the deeper competition issues. And it shuts out the other big global players, you know the names, Amazon and Google. Some believe that it's a tactic to really try to avoid tougher regulations, but also keep a little bit of that market power, which quite honestly sounds totally on brand for a giant cloud company trying to play in Europe. Al, do you think Microsoft is just paying lip service, or do you think this is part of a nefarious plot?
Oh, I'm a fan of nefarious plots, at least. They make interesting stories, and I don't know, I'm not too much of a conspiracy theorist, but I do think that big organizations are going to do what's best for the big organization, and Microsoft with Azure as its crown jewels is going to be no different from any other big organization. What's happened here is that the CISPE, yeah, I don't know how to pronounce that either, have this group of providers in Europe have done a deal with Microsoft where they get better licensing for Microsoft products than other cloud providers who are potentially not in Europe. I think this is good in terms of providing more options for Europe based customers to maintain data sovereignty, and that's really one of the central elements in here, is that a lot of customers in Europe would like to use Microsoft Cloud but want guarantees that, for example, their German company's data will always remain on German soil and won't end up maybe in Polish data center or some other location that is not German soil currently. Um, so it's interesting that this has all happened in Europe, a place with a lot of regulation and market intervention through regulation. Also, with a lot of data sovereignty. This really, to me, does come back to that data sovereignty thing around Europe. But there are a huge number of other cloud providers, both large and small, who would like to have a more friendly licensing model with the Microsoft software. So I think this is getting ahead of some kind of regulation and a precedent being set by that regulation that might come back and bite them around the world as maybe regulators start saying, well, Microsoft's misusing its position of dominance again, and is using its licensing to be anti-competitive. So yeah, I think we will see continued little deals being done to avoid a big precedent. because those deals can always be wound back later on if it suits Microsoft better that way. Like any large organization, their objective is to maximize shareholder value, and they don't do that by minimizing cost to customers, at least not directly. Broadcom has launched the Tomahawk Ultra, powerful Ethernet chips, switch chip built to support large AI and high performance compute HPC systems. It connects up to 256 processors, 4 times more than NVIDIA's competing product, and uses open Ethernet standards instead of proprietary InfiniBand technology. The Ultra offers very fast data speeds, low delays, advanced features. It supports scale up and scale out computing, making it easier and cheaper to build and manage AI networks. Chips made using TSMC's 5 nanometer processor and is already shipping to customers, so we should be seeing this shipping in some switches soon, Tom.
We absolutely should. And if you haven't figured it out yet, the reason why this is not just a plain old Tomahawk is because of Ultra. The Ultra was not just a random superlative that they picked out of the dictionary. This is, in fact, running Ultra Ethernet. You know, that industry thing that they got together with companies like Cisco and AMD to do basically is like, oh, NVIDIA, you want to create a custom proprietary protocol for doing AI Ethernet stuff. What if we did one of our own and made it a standard? Because that's what they did. And they released the 1.0 standard recently, a few months ago, which basically means that's about enough time for a company like Broadcom to come out with something that utilizes that spec. And of course, they're going to pick Tomahawk because Tomahawk is their switching line. And so I think this is a valuable lesson because we've seen NVIDIA making moves in other places. NVIDIA has opened up their architecture. No. Hold on. Before you leave that comment talking about NVIDIA and open source and all that other stuff, I wasn't talking about that. I was talking about the fact that NVIDIA is allowing other companies to design and sell Spectrum X platforms. You know, it would be like if Cisco wrote an RFC for EIGRP. They did. The idea here is that NVIDIA wants more of the companies that are leading in networking to sell their Spectrum X technology because once the companies that are buying NVIDIA technology start using Spectrum X in the network, they're kind of locked in. You know, that thing we hate, vendor lock in. Well, in this case, Broadcom is hoping that people are going to start deploying Ultra Ethernet. And the idea is that they're selling this on a trusted platform, Tomahawk. They're selling it as, well, it's a Tomahawk, but it does more. So if you're already looking to refresh to build out a new AI pod or something like that, why don't you give us a shot? We'll probably send some people out there to make sure that it works. Everything will be copacetic. And as soon as you know that it works the way you want it to, we will continue to improve it as new specs come out for Ultra Ethernet. And then you won't have to use Spectrum X, right? That is the ultimate goal here, is that they really want people to leverage their technology. And look, I get it. This is the same thing that I've had to deal with in my life in the Cisco world. There's Cisco, and then there's what everybody else got together to make the standard so that it's the opposite of Cisco. Only this time, it's companies like Broadcom and Cisco getting together to make a standard that's the opposite of NVIDIA, which is one, a way that you know that you are the biggest player in the market, but two, it is probably the only way that people are going to be able to come together to create this standard. Because if Broadcom and Cisco had been competing with each other to create a standard for an open Ethernet fabric that would allow it to compete with InfiniBand, we would have never gotten to this point. The fact that NVIDIA kind of won that battle tells me that they all know where the issues are. And so that's kind of where we are. And bravo to Broadcom for getting it out the door. Granted, they kind of knew what it was going to look like. So, you know, it's like when those draft Wi-Fi specification routers come out, and it's like, well, we were involved in writing the draft, so we were pretty sure that this was going to be final. So we were able to get one out the door before anybody else. That's the kind of thing that you want from someone who's a market leader in switching technology.
Well, it's time for us to take a little bit of a closer look, and we saw that hackers have used a serious and previously unknown flaw in Microsoft SharePoint server software to launch a major global cyber attack. The attackers hit US government agencies, universities, energy companies, and more, but it only affects on site servers, not the cloud service that Microsoft would rather you use. Stolen data and encryption keys could let hackers keep access to systems even after they are patched to mitigate the original vulnerability, and Microsoft has released a fix for some versions, but many servers are still at risk. Authorities in the US, Canada, and Australia are investigating, with over 50 organizations confirmed already affected so far. Tom, have you been able to find out the attacker's identity or their goals for this attack?
Well, I can tell you what their goals are: to steal as much stuff as is not bolted down and get out the door before anybody catches us. That's every thieves' idea, right? And SharePoint's pretty juicy because it's a document repository, so we can get in there and get all the stuff. As to the identity of the people, no, but I can wager a guess. According to some articles that I read, the traffic seems to be sourced from China. Go figure. Chinese hacking groups are exploiting vulnerabilities to steal American data. News at 11 and 12, and possibly at 2 if we can get into SharePoint and write up the scripts. So this is basically what happened: is Microsoft discovered a vulnerability and they announced it on Saturday. You knew it was bad if they announced it on Saturday, but they were already 2 weeks behind the curve because they were starting to see intrusions on the 7th of July. So they've had a 2-week lead time to get this patch put together. And you are absolutely right. They only patched the latest versions of SharePoint back to, I think, 2019. So if you're still running SharePoint 2016, why? Upgrade, please. Call Microsoft. I bet you they'll cut you a deal. Um, Although it's funny because Microsoft has been trying for a very long time to get people to move off of self hosting. Remember, like a lot of the issues that we've had with Exchange over the past few years have been in because Microsoft is slow to release patches for on prem Exchange. And their argument is, well, why don't you just move it into the cloud? Well, I mean, I know why Microsoft wants you to move it into the cloud because you get money for that, right? You get to pay a rental fee for your Exchange server. But there's the pesky regulatory thing, and there are companies that aren't in the U.S. and want to control over their data. Surprise! We found a bug in SharePoint. And here's the other thing too. As you mentioned in the article, this is what makes it especially insidious. One, the traffic looks like normal user traffic. So it's not like you're trying to send flood the machine or you're trying to do like a cross-site scripting attack or anything like that. It really does look like legitimate traffic. But two, one of the things that they're able to steal before you can stop them is the hardware key to the machine, which means that after you abscond with that, you can just get back in unless you change a lot of things on the system. And that's a problem because this creates what we like to refer to as a foothold. And this is one of the things that if you're an attacker, you want persistence. You want to be able to get into the system as surreptitiously as possible, create a foothold, persist, and that way, whenever they've deployed countermeasures, you can get back in whenever you want. And this is one of the things that we saw. I would be willing to bet this is related to the same groups that did the big email hack last year. They don't care about the executive's email box today. I mean, yeah, harvesting all those emails would be really nice. They want access to that email box in 6 months because that's hot intel that they can use or sell or extort with, right? And that's the name of the game here. You get access to a SharePoint server, especially unfettered access because you have hardware keys. You could get design documents for new software or new hardware. You could get a press release a couple of days before it gets released and possibly make yourself a little bit of coin on the side by investing heavily or selling off if you know there's bad news coming. Like, this is problematic. And I promise you, there are auditors out there right now that are licking their chops because they know that SharePoint is going to make them a small fortune for the next couple of years because the amount of time that it's going to take to get those things patched, to verify their patch status, and to continually monitor them to make sure that nobody's already got a foothold in them is going to produce a lot of revenue for cybersecurity companies. Al, would you be worried if you were running SharePoint right now?
Well, yes. Yes, I would if I was running on-premises SharePoint, whether it was my own or if I was maybe using a service that was being offered to me by a third party that's not Microsoft that were hosting a SharePoint environment for me. I've seen both of those recently in customers, and this would be kind of terrifying that there could be that persistent access over time, and that the mitigation to remove that persistent access doesn't seem to be something that's being directly addressed in these patches. Um, there does need to be an effort out of Microsoft to find a way or to provide a mechanism to lock back out that persistent access without having to, pave the whole road again, rebuild all of your Exchange environment, your SharePoint environment from the ground up, because that's a nightmare. Uh, but I think, Tom, you're right on this one, that the slowness of releasing patches, right? 2 weeks after they first saw some vulnerability or some exploitation of this vulnerability before there were patches out for the on-prem SharePoint. You've got to imagine that the reason we haven't seen a big attack on the SharePoint on Office 365 is that that patch was released a lot faster.
Yeah, and that's one of the other things that they're talking about here, because somebody asked me this yesterday. Do you think that this affects the cloud services too? And my initial thought before I read more reports was, yeah, well, of course, if it's a flaw in SharePoint, it's going to affect it whether it's on-prem or hosted. The difference, of course, is that if it's hosted in Microsoft Azure, we can patch it right away. And I'm sure that they deployed those patches the instant they were ready so that their cloud customers were at least not affected by this, which is probably going to be a selling point, right? If you want to be protected from all this stuff migrated into SharePoint Online, and you won't have these problems, which kind of feels a little bit disingenuous, right? If you're not going to keep the on-prem software up to date, why bother selling it? I Here's the other thing that people really need to understand. We talk a lot about this on the rundown. Like, I joke all the time that if I just wanted to do my stories all were breach stories or exploit stories, I could. I mean, that's basically what the Risky Business podcast is all about, right? But this one was not one that was only on like Bleeping Computer or the Register. This hit the Washington Post. This hit Reuters. This was big. This is big. When regular traditional news outlets pick up on your problems, you have messed up. And so, Microsoft, you need to get the dwell time on those patches down a little bit, and you need to start patching versions that are not, like N-2 at the very least. But also, you need to make sure that your on-premises customers are getting the same level of service as your cloud customers. Because if you don't, you're going to have a bunch of unhappy people who are just going to dump this and go back to the good old fashioned thing of burning all their documents to CDs and passing them around the office like frisbees. Luckily, we don't do that around here because we are a modern organization that continues to have great events like the ones that we have coming up. And we are just a couple weeks out from our next big one, which is going to be Tech Field Day Extra at Share Cleveland. That's going to be taking place August 19th and 20th. Stephen Foskett is going to be traveling up the road to talk about all the great stuff involved with mainframe computing. Head over to techfieldday.com because we just signed up a new sponsor and you're going to want to check out who they are. And then we're going to take a little bit of a break and let the heat come down a little bit. And Al, you're going to be back with the next event after that.
I am. It's AI Infrastructure Field Day, returning in September 10th, 11th, maybe 12th as well. I'm getting together my panel of delegates for that and the presenting sponsoring companies. We're building out that list at the moment, and it's going to be another awesome event. We're going to have a lot of fun for those few days and learn quite a lot about some of this AI stuff that you might have heard about. Of course, we take a little break after that before Tom has to come out and make sure that we're not getting in the New Zealand news the way that Microsoft exploit did this week, because you're back for Security Field Day.
Yeah, I'm bringing a whole bunch of friends to help me out too, because what good is a Tiger team if you don't have a team? And we're going to have some amazing delegates that are going to be showing up to help us out with this great conversation. I cannot wait to have them on site with me to talk to the great companies that we already have signed up. Techfieldday.com for more details on that. We get to have some fun conversations there, whether we are figuring out the right frequency to hack McDonald's drive-through machines, or just talking about why we think phishing buttons don't always work the way they're supposed to. That's one of the reasons why we love getting together and talking at Field Day. Just like we love getting together and talking with you every Wednesday here on the Tech Field Day Rundown. It is a pleasure to be able to create this content for you, whether you're consuming it on our website at techstrong.it or you are headed over to YouTube to listen to us be snarky. and then possibly even subscribing in your favorite podcast application of choice. Let's be fair. If you hear my voice complaining about security, you're probably going to want to ride that bike a little bit faster so you can get to a stopping point and put on some real music. But no matter what you do, make sure that you check us out here as well as all of the other things that we produce, because we are a part of so many other pieces of the Future Room group that there's a good chance you're going to hear us somewhere throughout your week, and not just making fun of the news either. We will be back next Wednesday with more great news and maybe some not so great news, depending on how quickly people can patch things. But until then, for myself, Alastair, and Corey, our amazing producer, as well as all the other folks who contribute great things to the Tech Field Day Rundown, thanks for tuning in. Stay warm or cool, as the case may be, and we will see you in the next episode.